I want to tell you about something really special that happened to me last night. And there's Zoe saying hi, and she was a part of this actually, in a way. But as you can see, I have not planted anything this year, and I think it's too late for me to get started. You can see what I played around with last year. Well, now you can't. But anyway, one of the things I've been doing that's kind of odd is, and I don't know why exactly, but I've been watering weeds, these weeds, and I think part of it's, they're alive and it feels like they ought to keep living. They're not harming anything. And part of it too, I used to have a rose bush, rose plant thing that was growing here, and it died. And I secretly hope that maybe it left behind some kind of seed that might blossom one day, but that hasn't happened yet. But anyway, so I keep watering the weeds just to see what might happen, and I guess. But anyway, you can see these just go on forever. I don't think it's wheat stalk or anything. It's just a weed. But anyway, so last night Zoe wanted to come back into the house, and so I happened to notice this one that I'd been watering, and it was a sunflower. It made me so happy, and it was not something I planted. None of my neighbors have them. I've never planted sunflowers before, actually, and I know it looks like it back there, but those are not sunflower. I don't. Who knows what those are? But anyway, it made me so happy, and it made me think about this year and how. Um, just with everything that's going on, and for so many people, so much worse than I can even relate to. But we keep going and we keep trying anyway. And in many ways, it's like we're watering weeds, and what's the point? And this time, this one surprised me, and it just got me thinking. We ought to keep watering hope and see what pops up, and it certainly made my night and my day, and many more to come, I'm sure. So, anyway, I wanted to share that, and be well, friends.
Well, I wanted to share that
Mm-hmm.
with you because these last few days, or the last couple, that was a couple of weeks ago, but these last few days, especially, I've been thinking about how we are at the 6-month mark of our virtual church and experience with the pandemic, and that's not virtual. Our experience with the pandemic is very real. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to say to for this moment, how we could mark it, um, that reflection has held with me because it certainly felt true for myself, and I think it might be for many of us to different extents. And I don't mean to minimize everything down to a gardening metaphor, but um, it does feel like we're watering weeds, that we're going through the motions, just trying to survive this pandemic. It's, um, maybe it's health issues for you, or financial stress, or relationship strains, or continued experiences of racism that feel even more that are even more apparent. The inequity and injustice of it. Maybe it's simply the the unrelenting adrenaline surges to get through that then lead to deeper crashes of fatigue and emotional harm. We're all going through the motions trying to survive, and it hasn't been easy, and it comes with so many costs and so many losses, and still you persist in pressing forward. And it feels like you're watering weeds just because that's all you've had the energy to garden. And yet, even as we keep pressing on, we're doing more than simply watering weeds. We're watering hope, and hope that sometimes might surprise us with grace that sprouts up along the way. And maybe for you, that's an unexpected letter or card in the mail, or a phone call from somebody, or an email you weren't expecting. Maybe it's virtual game night with friends, or a backyard conversation with somebody. Maybe it's even been a glimpse of a deepening relationship at home, that with family, with roommates. Maybe it's been experiencing the love and connection of your church in a new way. Whatever it is, we're we're doing more than just watering weeds. We're watering hope, and and hope will be a part of what sustains us in the months that are yet to come too. As I think about how resilient you've all been, I think too of how flexible you've been. You've learned technology. Most of us have learned how to mute and unmute, though maybe every other week or so. I'm forgetting on my end anyway. Um, you've given up your usual typical patterns of worshiping in a building next to your friends, and instead worshiping together in your homes across a computer. You've continued giving, but maybe you don't write checks or put it in a plate anymore. You have learned how to do it online. You've continued to care for your neighbors, but maybe in different ways, physically distant, more creative ways. You've been expressing your gratitude in overwhelmingly encouraging ways to the staff and the church. You've been a touch point for one another as the church, and in many different relationships. You've been embodying your faith in the ways that you care for one another, and you've embodied your faith in how you're seeking to care for those not just within but also beyond our congregation. Those within our congregation and beyond our congregation who experience racism, for instance. You know, if all we were experiencing was a pandemic, then your resilience and flexibility would be hallmarks enough. But at the same time, many of us who are non-Black members of FBC have been awakened to or reminded of or activated about our original epidemic as a nation that's yet to be eradicated, and it's what we know to be racism. And some of our non-Black members wonder why we talk about racial justice and anti-racism in our services and as a church, and I think it's pretty easy to connect it to the teachings and parables of Jesus, whom we worship, whether it's the Good Samaritan or the lost sheep or the persistent widow. So many of his stories and teachings speak to the experiences of the people he spent so much of his time with, those who were marginalized and silenced in his society. And they are the ones, he says, are the inheritors of the kingdom of God. So that's why, as a Christian church, we speak about the ways our faith must necessarily be accompanied by works, by love, by justice that disrupts any oppressive status quo. But if that wasn't convincing enough for you, then let me add one final consideration. I have shared this many times before, how much time I've spent in our archives and studying our history, and often I focus on those important moments and periods in our nation's history to see what we were doing and saying as a church. And time and again, I'm inspired, I'm confused, I'm disappointed, and then I'm hopeful sometimes, and almost every time desiring to keep searching, because the actions and so many inactions of our church at those various moments leave me unsettled. Like during slavery, why did our church only speak about prayer and heaven and didn't demand justice that looked like abolition? On and on across the years, you can track our history and see times when we did respond well and other times where we didn't respond at all, so often worrying about minor things. Not that prayer's minor, but whether we should ban people from the church because they drank alcohol. That feels minor. And I guess I look back and I wonder why they didn't speak to these moments, and why it's so hard to find what they did say. Why is it that these were the pieces that we have to look back at? And I guess I think then ahead, 100 years, 50 years from now, 10 years from now, next year, when people look back at our history, will they think that we cared only about prayer and good music? Or will they be able to tell very clearly what we believed about God, what we believed about Jesus, what we believed about his teachings and what it means for our faith to be Christians, to follow his way? Would that be easy to figure out? That's another piece or image that guides me, guides us as we move forward. You've been flexible and resilient and loving, and you have stretched and grown in so many ways, and so many of you have been a part of expanding your understanding and our understanding as a church, and what it means to follow Jesus in this moment, in this time, and anti-racist actions and beliefs and postures and policies beyond our church and within our church, work that we will continue to unpack together. And it brings me to a final thought as we move to communion, this practice that is something tangible, that reminds us of Jesus' own flesh and blood. And how gathering across the city and across the country, we're doing that with whatever it is you have in your hand or in your kitchen. We're doing that. We're grabbing it and we're saying that this is a reminder of Jesus, and at the same time we are remembering him. We are remembering ourselves as followers of Jesus, as this body of Christ, and it reminds us of so many other people who are systematically detached from so many life-giving, flourishing ways of being. And so our call is not just to worship on a Sunday morning with good music and with inspiring prayers and earnest prayers for our friends. It's about reminding us, helping us to remember what it is to follow Jesus, to care for those who have been pushed aside and pushed down and silenced, and elevate their voices and be a part of stepping back to do so. And so I have one more video that I want to share with you, and it's a song just inviting us to reflect on peace, and not peace like we all need to get along kind of peace, but a peace that is just, that requires something of us to make it a reality. So from that, then we will transition into communion. But if you will, just receive this video and this song.
Thank you, sweetheart. 2, 3.
Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. For in the giving we shall receive, and in the dying we're given life. Lord, make me an instrument of instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Where there is sorrow, let me sow hope. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is injury, your pardon give, your consolation to those in pain. Lord,